History records victories and defeats, but some moments are remembered not for battles won, but for the power to make even the strongest pause in awe. Vlad the Impaler commanded such a moment. Ottoman chroniclers tried to write it down, but their words stopped short. Reports ended abruptly, witnesses returned shaken, unable to fully describe what they had seen. It was not bloodshed alone that marked this day, but a message calculated with precision, a demonstration of control and understanding that reached beyond weapons or numbers. When his opponent saw it, he did not speak, he did not move, he stood silent, confronted with a reality he could not have imagined. Before we continue, let me say this. If you are watching this without subscribing to Echo Mind Chronicles and turning on notifications, you are choosing to leave knowledge behind. Support the channel and never miss the moments history almost forgot. Even his greatest enemy stood in silence when he saw what Vlad had done. In the mid-15th century, Wallachia stood as a small principality wedged between powerful empires, a land constantly threatened by the growing strength of the Ottoman Empire. For decades, the Ottomans demanded tribute, sent envoys, and launched raids that tested the resilience of Wallachian rulers. Every year brought new pressure, and every refusal, even a minor one, risked devastation. Vlad III, known later as Vlad the Impaler, had been shaped by these forces from a young age. Taken as a boy by the Ottomans to ensure his father's loyalty, he spent years observing the empire at its most disciplined, its most precise, and its most unyielding. He watched their methods of control, the way obedience was enforced, and how fear could be structured into strategy. When he finally returned to Wallachia, he brought with him a mind forged in captivity, determined to reclaim what had been taken and to ensure that his enemies understood the cost of defiance. It was during this time that a group of Ottoman convicts arrived at the Wallachian frontier, sent as expendable units for border operations. To them, Wallachia was a distant, foreign land. To Vlad, they represented more than just prisoners. They were instruments through which he could demonstrate the lessons he had learned, a means to communicate a message that would reach far beyond their individual fates and into the minds of those who believed they held power over him. In the early months of Vlad's rule, a small contingent of Ottoman convicts was dispatched into Wallachian lands, sent to serve on frontier missions that demanded little more than obedience and a willingness to endure hardship. They crossed rivers, climbed ridges, and marched through villages, unaware that their presence had already been noted by Wallachian scouts. Vlad's men moved silently, following the convicts without revealing themselves. Within days, the convicts were surrounded, their numbers too few to resist, and yet they were taken alive, spared from immediate punishment. Wallachians who observed the capture assumed that a simple execution would follow, a swift end to a minor threat, yet Vlad's intentions were different. He did not act out of impulse, nor did he seek only vengeance. Instead, he sought to deliver a lesson, a calculated demonstration that would resonate long after the battlefield had emptied. The rumor spread quickly among Wallachians and neighboring territories. This was not about killing alone. This was about a message, a display so carefully constructed that it would leave an impression far greater than any clash of swords or siege of walls. What he intended would not just punish, it would communicate power, resolve, and understanding in a way that would linger in the minds of all who learned of it. And if you are watching this and have not yet subscribed to Echo Mind Chronicles, you are taking this knowledge and walking away without acknowledgement. At least subscribe now. Historians don't abandon the archives, and the full story is only beginning. As night fell over the Wallachian countryside, Vlad issued a single order. All torches were to be extinguished. Darkness enveloped the camp, not by chance, but by design. Every shadow, every quiet corner, was part of a deliberate plan to unsettle those who thought they were in control. The Ottoman convicts, unaware of what awaited them, were gathered and lined up, their minds filled with uncertainty, their hearts sensing the weight of something approaching. Wallachian soldiers moved with restraint, maintaining a solemn silence, honoring an unspoken tradition that gave power to their prince's presence without uttering a word. No commands were shouted, no instruments of punishment were displayed. The very stillness of the night became the instrument of Vlad's authority. Vlad understood, more clearly than most leaders, that fear could be more potent than any army, that the impression left on the mind often outlasted the wounds inflicted on the body. Each step, each gesture, each pause was calculated to remind his observers that the bounds of power were measured not in numbers alone, but in the certainty of command. And in that darkness, with only the faint outline of figures moving under the moonlight, he was preparing something that would be remembered not for its immediacy, but for its effect on those who witnessed it. What he did next wasn't just punishment, it was political theater. At dawn, the clearing transformed under Vlad's meticulous direction. Wooden stakes were arranged in precise rows, banners fluttered in the wind, shields were positioned to reflect light in a deliberate pattern, and decoys were placed to create the impression of an organized force far larger than reality. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed a battlefield frozen in time, a memorial to some past conflict. But to those present, it was a carefully orchestrated demonstration of authority and control. Each convict was made to face a symbol of their perceived failure or misdeed, a ritual of public accountability that drew on Wallachian and Ottoman practices of marking transgression. Nothing was left to chance. The alignment, the spacing, the gestures, each element contributed to the message Vlad intended to send. Vlad walked silently among them, inspecting each individual, offering no words, no sign of emotion. The convicts understood that their prince's gaze alone was enough, that every motion, every pause, carried meaning. Ottoman sources later noted that the silence of the scene was more frightening than any clash of swords, that it imposed a weight on the mind that lingered far longer than any immediate threat could. In this carefully constructed space, fear became a tool of strategy, a force capable of shaping behavior, of sending a message that extended beyond the walls of Wallachia. Each detail was deliberate, each gesture measured. This was the moment where Vlad's lessons in psychological discipline, learned in distant lands and harsh courts, were brought to life in a form that was as precise as it was unforgettable. As the first shadows of evening stretched across the clearing, Vlad's design became more apparent. Fires were lit along the perimeter, their flickering light casting moving patterns that gave the scene an almost otherworldly presence. From the forest beyond, the steady rhythm of drums echoed, carrying a cadence that unsettled anyone within earshot. The convicts were positioned with deliberate care, each standing or kneeling in a place that symbolized a misdeed, a failure, or a betrayal that had led them to this moment. This display was not intended for the convicts alone. Vlad's true audience was far larger: the Ottoman commanders who might hear of it, the envoys who would report back, and anyone who thought to test his authority. Every arrangement, every light and shadow, every sound was a calculated measure to communicate his dominance, to imprint a psychological mark that could influence strategy, morale, and perception without the need for a single act of mass violence. If this level of planning and precision, this application of historical understanding, gives you chills, and you still haven't subscribed to Echo Mind Chronicles, what are you waiting for? Don't be that one viewer who leaves the story behind. Join us, and ensure you never miss the lessons hidden in history's shadows. Among the witnesses to Vlad's carefully orchestrated display was an Ottoman commander, or perhaps a spy sent to observe the records. Do not clarify the exact identity. What is clear is what he saw. As he approached the clearing, the arrangement of convicts, the flickering fires, the rhythmic echoes of drums, all combined into a spectacle that froze him in place. He did not shout orders. He did not advance. He simply stopped, unable to comprehend the precision and intent before him. Ottoman chroniclers would later record that he returned to his superiors speechless, struggling to convey the message without diminishing its effect. Word of the event spread quickly through the empire, carried by reports, whispers, and letters, becoming a story that served as both warning and lesson. Vlad's opponents learned, even before any battle was fought, that his true power lay not in the immediate use of force, but in the careful shaping of perception, in the ability to unnerve and dominate the minds of those who might challenge him. This moment marked a turning point. It demonstrated that fear, when applied with strategy and precision, could achieve results armies alone could not. Vlad had mastered a form of influence that extended far beyond the reach of swords, and it was a method that would ensure his reputation endured long after the echoes of the night had faded. The impact of Vlad's display was felt far beyond the clearing. Wallachian peasants spoke of it for decades, recounting how their prince had commanded silence, strategy, and order to achieve what armies often could not. Stories passed from one village to another, not of slaughter alone, but of the control and precision with which he asserted his authority. The Ottoman governor, tasked with responding to the incursions and irregular tactics, hesitated for months before mounting any further action. Intelligence gathered through spies, some sent by Sultan Mehmed II himself, attempted to unravel the mystery of what had occurred, but the psychological mark left by Vlad's design proved enduring. In the aftermath, Vlad's reputation grew in a way that outpaced even the mightiest armies. He became known not simply as a ruler or a soldier, but as a figure whose presence, whose understanding of human perception and fear, could influence decisions and alter plans before a single confrontation occurred. The lesson was clear. Power extended beyond the battlefield. Fear, wielded with precision, was a weapon capable of shaping entire campaigns and unsettling even the most disciplined opponents. Vlad's demonstration, while designed to intimidate his enemies, had effects that extended far beyond its immediate audience. Among the people of Wallachia, it inspired a renewed sense of unity. Peasants, soldiers, and nobles alike recognized the authority and resolve of their prince, understanding that he was willing to do whatever was necessary to protect the principality. At the same time, the Ottomans interpreted the act as defiance, providing justification to intensify their military campaigns against Wallachia. Envoys from European courts, who had heard only fragments of the events, recorded exaggerated accounts, emphasizing the fear and awe that seemed to radiate from Vlad himself. These reports spread across borders, shaping a perception that combined fact and embellishment, and slowly, the name Vlad Drăculea entered folklore as a figure larger than life, a ruler whose reputation would outlast his years and inspire stories that blurred the line between history and legend. This moment in Wallachian history is remembered not for the acts of violence themselves, but for the mastery of strategic theater. Vlad did not simply punish. He orchestrated every detail to communicate dominance, to control perception, and to shape behavior. Fires, shadows, drums, and positioning were not incidental, they were tools, carefully selected and deployed to deliver a message stronger than any sword. In this single display, Vlad weaponized symbolism, silence, and fear, creating an effect that rippled across the Ottoman Empire and emboldened Wallachian resistance. His tactics were studied, feared, and recounted, altering how campaigns were planned, how opponents approached him, and ultimately, how the world remembers him today. If you reach the end of this story and still refuse to subscribe to Echo Mind Chronicles, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. Even Vlad would be shocked. The comment section is open, explain yourself there. If you think what you've just witnessed was chilling, that was only a glimpse of the mind of Vlad the Impaler. In the next episode, we will explore what happened when Sultan Mehmed II himself finally confronted Vlad, the strategies, the standoff, and the psychological battle that followed. The story does not end here. The legacy of fear, cunning, and strategy continues, And what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about power and survival in the age of empires